There's a moment in every pursuit, romantic, social, or professional, where the dynamic shifts. At first, you're the one reaching out, explaining, offering your time, your energy, your soul, and then something inside you cracks. You feel it, don't you? That slow burn in your chest when your presence becomes background noise, that silent ache when your kindness is met with convenience. How many times have you confused access with connection? How often have you poured into people who only turned toward you when they needed to feel wanted? We tell ourselves that consistency is strength, but sometimes it's just a mask for fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of facing the truth that maybe, just maybe, they never valued you in the first place. The Stoics knew this feeling. Pulling away, choosing yourself, and standing still while they drift isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And when you stop chasing, when you let the silence speak for you, the people who once overlooked you begin to unravel in your absence. If you feel the weight of these words, if you've been walking through life giving your power away just to be seen, consider subscribing for the part of you that's finally ready to stop running and start remembering who you are. In the beginning, the instinct feels pure. You reach out. You check in. You care. And with every message, every gesture, you believe you're building something real. Connection, intimacy, loyalty. It's what you've been taught, to prove your value by showing up first, by giving without being asked, by making the other person feel seen, safe, chosen. But slowly, something begins to shift beneath the surface. The more you give, the less it seems to matter. The more you reach out, the more they pull back. It's subtle at first, delayed replies, vague answers, missed calls. You brush it off, thinking maybe they're busy, maybe you're overthinking, but deep down, a quiet truth starts to whisper. This isn't balance. This is dependence disguised as devotion. It's a difficult realization because you never intended to lose yourself in the process. But that's exactly what happens when pursuit becomes the default. You don't just chase them. You give them the pen to write your story. And in doing so, without realizing it, you place them on a pedestal they never asked to be on, and you kneel before it without question. The message, though unspoken, is loud. You are above me. I need you more than you need me. And human nature responds in predictable ways. What is freely offered, repeatedly, without demand, becomes expected. What becomes expected turns into background noise. And what turns into noise is no longer heard. The Stoics warned us about this pattern long before it had modern vocabulary. Epictetus wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about things." When you chase, it's not the other person's behavior that hurts you. It's the meaning you assign to their reactions. Their silence becomes a story. Their distance becomes a rejection. And suddenly, your inner world becomes entirely dependent on someone else's response or lack of it. That's not connection. That's emotional outsourcing. And in trying to win their attention, you lose command of your own narrative. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Modern culture often confuses effort with virtue. You're told to express your feelings, to fight for what you love, to never give up. And while there's truth in that when both people are meeting halfway, it becomes dangerous when one person starts sprinting toward someone who's barely walking. That kind of imbalance doesn't lead to closeness. It leads to collapse because, sooner or later, the one who chases starts to feel invisible. And invisibility in the presence of another is one of the deepest kinds of emotional pain. What many never realize is that stepping back isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You're not punishing someone by withdrawing. You're protecting your peace. You're saying, without saying, I refuse to beg for a space that should have been offered. And when that space is suddenly empty, something remarkable begins to happen. The very silence they once ignored begins to echo. The absence becomes louder than the words ever were, not because you're gone, but because you're no longer trying. That difference is powerful. People often notice what's missing more than they appreciate what's consistent. It's a strange flaw in human perception. We normalize what we always have. We miss what we took for granted. And so, the moment you stop pouring energy into someone who only absorbs but never gives, you trigger a different kind of attention. Not because they miss you necessarily, but because they miss the feeling they had when you were around. The warmth, the certainty, the validation. And without it, they're left facing a version of themselves they don't know how to comfort. Still, the hardest part of this dynamic is the internal battle you'll face when you choose to stop chasing. It will feel wrong. It will feel like giving up. It may even feel like failure. But that discomfort isn't weakness. It's withdrawal from a pattern that was never meant to last. And what follows is often grief. Not for the person, but for the version of you that believed you had to earn love by proving you were enough. That version served you once, but it's not built for peace. It's built for pursuit. And peace doesn't live in pursuit. Peace lives in presence, mutual, respectful, unforced. This is why your stillness becomes a mirror. The moment you stop explaining, stop proving, stop trying, the other person is left to face a silence they can't control. And most people fear what they can't control. Your withdrawal removes the script they were used to. No more reactions, no more predictable efforts, just space. Space that forces reflection. And reflection, when it's not met with comfort, often turns into regret. This isn't manipulation. It's cause and effect. They don't feel the weight of your presence until they've had to live without it. But here's the truth you need to remember. Your worth was never tied to their recognition. It wasn't proven by the number of messages you sent or the emotional labor you carried. Your value doesn't increase when someone finally realizes what they lost. It was always there. The difference is, you've stopped offering it to those who wouldn't see it until it was gone. You'll feel a strong temptation to go back, to explain, to remind them who you were when they had you. But silence can say everything explanation cannot. When done with intention, silence becomes a boundary, not a wall of anger, but a door of self-respect. It says, I'm not here to convince, I'm here to live. And in a world obsessed with noise, with proving and posting and reacting, that kind of quiet becomes sacred. There comes a moment when you stop explaining, not out of spite, but out of clarity. It's not loud. It doesn't come with an announcement or a warning. It just happens. A decision is made, often quietly, within yourself. You choose not to send the follow-up message. You choose not to ask for understanding. And that silence, though outwardly small, carries an enormous weight. Because people are used to reactions, they're used to explanations. They expect a reason, a label, a neatly tied-up ending they can either argue with or dismiss. But when none of that arrives, when all they receive is stillness, something inside them begins to shift. The power of silence isn't in what it says, but in what it forces others to hear. And what they hear isn't your voice, it's their own. That's what makes it so unsettling. You're no longer part of the story they're writing. You've stopped participating in the cycle. And now, they're left staring at a space you once filled, trying to make sense of the quiet you left behind. It's not rejection that rattles them. It's the absence of noise, of resistance, of closure. And without those, the mind loops. It replays old conversations. It examines old texts. It imagines what you must be thinking now that you've stopped speaking. Seneca once wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." And that's exactly what begins to happen. In the silence, their imagination becomes their enemy. They begin to suffer, not because of something you did, but because of everything you didn't say. Their mind fills in the gaps with assumptions, fears, guilt, longing. This is the silent shift of power. Not control through force, but through your absence. And ironically, the more composed your silence is, the louder it becomes to them. There is no accusation, no bitterness, no final words, just a calm withdrawal. And it leaves them wondering whether they misjudged you or, worse, underestimated you. It's easy to believe that power comes from being loud, being visible, being assertive. But real power often moves in quiet ways. It's not always in the confrontation. It's in the refusal to engage, the dignity to not defend, the strength to walk away without needing to be heard. That's what disrupts people the most. Because they can prepare for anger, they can brace for conflict. But they are defenseless against stillness, especially when that stillness used to be filled with your warmth, your effort, your presence. And once they realize the void you've left is no longer temporary, the panic begins, not outwardly, perhaps. They may still pretend nothing's wrong, but inside, the questions grow louder. Why aren't they reacting? Did I push them too far? Are they really done with me? It's not just curiosity, it's insecurity. Because now, they're no longer sure where they stand. And when someone doesn't know where they stand with you, That's when they start looking at their own behavior. That's when the mirror appears, not a distorted one that flatters the ego, but a sharp, honest reflection of who they were when they thought they had you. That reflection can be brutal. It shows them their indifference, the messages they left unanswered, the calls they ignored, the way they treated your effort as ordinary instead of recognizing it as rare. And now, without your presence to distract them from themselves, they sit in that discomfort. They might not say it out loud. In fact, they might act as if they don't care at all. But beneath that performance is a storm of uncertainty, and it's not about you anymore, it's about them. What your silence has done is remove their ability to control the narrative. And without that control, they begin to lose confidence in how they saw the connection in the first place. This is why silence is not passive, it's intentional. When you stop explaining, you remove their chance to debate your truth. When you stop chasing, you strip away the illusion that they were the prize. And when you do all of this without bitterness, you show them something they weren't prepared for. Self-respect that doesn't need validation. That's the shift. That's what makes them start to wonder whether they misread you entirely, because now you're not asking for closure. You're not waiting for clarity. You've become the clarity. And it's terrifying to those who thought you would never stop trying. But here's what matters most. You don't do this to manipulate. You don't go silent to punish. You go silent to heal, to reclaim the energy you were giving away freely, hoping it would come back as love, respect, or recognition. You stop because you finally see what the Stoics always knew. Inner peace isn't found in what others say to you, it's found in what you stop saying to them. And when your silence is born from that place, not pain, but peace, it becomes unshakable. They'll test it, of course. They'll send small signals, a reaction to your story, a vague message, an old memory brought up like it just resurfaced. But these aren't attempts to reconnect, they're attempts to pull you back into the pattern, to see if your silence is real. And your power lies in how you respond. Not with words, but with your posture, your steadiness, your refusal to go backward for the sake of comfort. Because once you've seen what they do with your presence, it's no longer your job to explain your absence. This is why attention is a currency, not just a gesture. And like money, the more freely it's handed out, the more inflated it becomes, the less value it holds. But when it's pulled back, when it's withheld, not out of pettiness, but out of self-respect, it gains strength again. People pay attention to what is no longer easily accessible. That's human nature. We value what requires effort. And once your presence demands effort, it becomes precious again. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And it's true. Your evolution is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs external validation to feel whole. When you shift from constant giver to silent observer, you're not playing games. You're aligning with your own growth. And that shift creates a contrast between who you were and who you are now. They remember the version of you who always checked in, who made them feel important, who gave without keeping score. But now, they're faced with someone who no longer gives attention just because it's asked for. And that gap, the space between the past and the present version of you, is powerful. It makes them wonder, did I lose something meaningful? Was I too distracted to notice what I had? And, most of all, can I still get it back? But here's the truth. They're not chasing you, not really. They're chasing how they felt when they had your attention. They're chasing the emotional certainty you used to provide. They're chasing the image of themselves that only existed when they were reflected in your eyes. Because that version of them, the one you saw, supported, and believed in, made them feel whole. And now that you've stopped mirroring it back to them, they're left with something they don't know how to fix. This is the quiet price of emotional generosity. When you make someone feel like the center of your universe, they come to believe that it's their natural place. But when you step back, when you no longer orbit them, they start to feel off balance. And rather than asking why you stepped back, they ask themselves why it feels so empty. Now, that discomfort is not your responsibility. It's the consequence of imbalance finally being corrected. Your withdrawal isn't a punishment. It's a return to self, a decision to redirect the energy you once scattered outward back into your own life. And in doing so, you begin to glow differently, not with arrogance, but with awareness. You don't chase. You don't beg. You simply walk forward. And in that forward motion, you create something magnetic, something they can feel but no longer touch. When they look at you now, they see someone unfamiliar, someone with boundaries, someone who doesn't explain, doesn't justify, doesn't overextend. You've become harder to read. And that mystery creates curiosity. But more than curiosity, it creates tension because now their certainty is gone. And in its place is a silent question. Did I lose something I never deserved to hold? The shift is subtle but undeniable. And that's the point. You didn't make it happen by forcing it. You didn't have to yell or prove a point. You simply removed your energy from where it wasn't valued. And in doing so, you reminded everyone around you of something essential. Attention is not free. It costs time, presence, emotion, and when it's given without care, it depletes you. But when you protect it, when you become selective with it, it becomes sacred. That's what changes everything. Not just how they see you, but how you see yourself. You're no longer defined by who responds to you. You're defined by who you choose to respond to. That's the real power. So no, they don't miss the version of you who's grown. They miss the one they could count on to give without hesitation. But that version of you doesn't live here anymore. And now, if they want your attention again, they'll have to earn it. Not through words, but through consistency, through presence, through effort. Because you've learned the difference between attention that flows freely from insecurity and attention that is offered as a gift, intentionally, sparingly, and from a place of peace. And when you reach that point, something remarkable happens. You no longer need them to notice your absence. You no longer care if they come back because you've already come back to yourself. There's a kind of strength that doesn't speak. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It simply removes itself, and in doing so, becomes undeniable. That's the kind of strength most people underestimate. We've been taught to believe that power looks like noise, like confrontation, like winning an argument or proving someone wrong. But the truth is, real power is often found in the quietest moments, the ones where you say nothing at all. When you stop chasing someone, you're not just changing your behavior. You're reclaiming your story. You're taking back the pen and deciding that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. The Stoics knew this deeply. They didn't preach dominance over others. They spoke of sovereignty over the self. And in that sovereignty, they found their deepest freedom. Epictetus once taught that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. But he didn't mean the freedom to control others. He meant the freedom to no longer be controlled by your own reactions. So, when you fall silent, when you detach, not out of bitterness, but from a deep, still understanding, you create a shift that others feel, even if they can't explain it. And that's when they start reaching out, not with apologies, but with small, vague attempts to reopen the door they once walked through so easily. Hey, how have you been? Was just thinking of you. Remember that night when... These aren't simple check-ins. They're feelers, soft probes in the dark designed not to reconnect, but to reassure. What they're really asking is, do I still matter to you? Because silence is ambiguous, and in that ambiguity, the mind becomes restless. It starts building stories. Doubt creeps in where confidence used to live. The same person who used to delay replies now hesitates before hitting send. The one who once made you feel like an afterthought now replays every interaction in their head. They're not looking for closure. They're looking for reassurance that they didn't mess it all up, that your absence doesn't mean they're truly replaceable. But the irony is, by the time they come back around, you've likely outgrown the version of yourself that ever needed their approval in the first place. You've sat with the silence. You've learned to enjoy it. You've seen that peace isn't something you have to beg for. It's something you can choose. That's when the shift becomes permanent because you no longer respond from the wound. You respond from the wisdom. As Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's exactly what your stillness forces them to confront. You've stopped cushioning them with your attention. You've stopped softening their ego with your reassurance. Now, all they have left to face is themselves and what they did when your heart was in their hands. Your silence becomes a mirror. And unlike words, mirrors can't be argued with. They just reflect. And what that reflection shows isn't just who they are. It shows who they were with you. It shows how little they gave, how easily they took, how quietly they assumed you'd always be there. And now that you're not, They're forced to sit with the realization that what they pushed away is no longer within reach. This isn't about punishment. This is about transformation. You didn't go silent to hurt them. You didn't detach to make them suffer. You did it because you finally saw what chasing was costing you. Your energy, your dignity, your clarity. You realized that the constant need to explain, to fix, to be chosen was slowly eroding your sense of self. And once you stopped trying to be understood, you finally began to understand yourself. That's the real essence of psychological strength. Not the ability to control others, but the ability to stay rooted when others try to shake you, to remain calm when chaos tempts you to react, to walk away. Not because you're weak, but because peace has become more valuable than being right. That's when you stop operating from emotion and start moving from principle. And once you do that, people can no longer predict you. They can't manipulate the same levers because you're no longer playing the same game. You don't need to remind them what they lost. You've become the reminder. Your growth is the proof. The way you move now, the calm in your tone, the boundaries in your actions, the clarity in your eyes, speaks louder than any speech ever could. They remember how easy it was to get your attention. And now, they feel how difficult it is to regain it. But here's the twist. They don't want you back because they miss who you are now. They want you back because they miss the version of themselves that existed when they were around you. That's the part they're chasing. The validation, the status, the emotional warmth they didn't have to earn. And now that it's gone, they're scrambling to get it back, not by rebuilding, but by repeating old patterns. The only difference is, you're no longer responding to them. And that's what burns. That's what creates psychological imbalance because they know you're not angry. They know you're not waiting. And that calm refusal to re-engage, that's what turns curiosity into obsession. The unpredictability, the uncertainty, the absence of closure, it gnaws at them in ways they don't admit, even to themselves. But you don't need to prove anything anymore. You've already won the quiet war, not because they're suffering, but because you've healed. You've stopped needing to be seen in order to know who you are. And that kind of inner clarity, it's magnetic. It draws in people, but more importantly, it filters them, too. Because now, you're no longer available to be misunderstood, to be undervalued, to be someone's emotional safety net while they decide if you're worthy. You've stepped into a different realm, a space where your silence holds weight, where your energy is sacred, and where your attention is no longer given away. It's earned, not by those who ask for it, but by those who understand what it means to hold it with care. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to chase to be chosen. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand still and let the silence reveal the truth. Because when you stop needing to be seen, you finally begin to see yourself clearly. If this spoke to you, there's another video waiting that will take you even deeper into this path of self-mastery. Click on one of the suggested videos on your screen. And thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom.